All right. I think it's time we get started. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. We have a full house online, and we probably will have more people join us here in person. I'm going to introduce myself and just introduce a little bit what we're going to do today, and we'll get started. So my name is Kilian Mukwete, and I'm an assistant professor here at Northeastern School of Architecture. And today I'll be moderating this discussion between Liza and Damian, who I'll kind of introduce a little bit. So for those who are online, you're going to be able to post comments and any questions that you might have, please type them in and we'll kind of keep checking that. That's how we're going to communicate. Those who are here will be able to kind of bring you in. So a little bit about today's conversation. So the AI and participatory planning event continues a rebooting democracy in the age of AI lecture series, which talks with innovative leaders, designers, thinkers, and change makers working to do democracy differently in the age of artificial intelligence. To learn more about the series, watch previous talks and sign up for future ones, and read our blog on AI, democracy, and governance. You can visit that at rebootdemocracy.ai/. The series is hosted by the Venn Center for Social Change in partnership with the Institute for Experiential AI at Northeastern University. This talk is also in partnership with Northeastern School of Architecture. We are honored today to be speaking with Liza Gazeva and Damiano Cigano, who is online with us today. You can wait for us, Damiano, from UrbanistAI. UrbanistAI is a generative AI platform to reimagine the future of our cities. It operates at the intersection of artificial intelligence and public participation, offering cities a method to harness collective intelligence for planning and policy design. Damiano is a co-founder of UrbanistAI, a Gen AI platform to reimagine the future of our cities, and SPIN unit, an urban research innovation practice. He does affiliated research at Tampere University, enabling multi-species transitions of cities and regions. And as a consultant, he is developing strategies for transformative governance. Liza is a Boston-based UX and UI designer and illustrator. She's a co-founder of Torrete, an Italian high-tech company, which develops AI-powered design software solutions and offers consulting services. She's one of the authors of UrbanistAI. In her work, she explores how AI can transform and augment design processes and creativity. They will present for about half an hour, maybe half an hour and a little bit more. And that will be followed by Q&A. Again, those who are online, you can submit your questions online and we'll be able to get to those. And yeah, I'll turn it over to our guest today, and you're going to be able to share screens and take it away.
Sure.
Thank you.
And then we'll start.
I'll do that. Okay, you're able to see my screen? Thank you so much. Yes, so thank you for having me here. Pleasure to be speaking at this event. You see a bit darkness here because in Finland it's past midnight, but happy to join this discussion. I want to tell you kind of where this comes from, where UrbanistAI started, because it's kind of a way back in 2019 when we started to work on this topic. And the kind of the catalyst for us to build UrbanistAI was when COVID hit, and many urban transformation projects were temporarily halted, which gave decision makers more time to reflect on whether the city that they imagined was the city that they wanted to build. Quite a few new buzzwords started to emerge as people in confined spaces started to shift their thinking more towards the human experience than so much the technologies that were around us. And in this moment, indeed, those new buzzwords started to emerge, like reimagine, rethink, unlearn, regenerative cities, social imaginations. It was basically, they were basically all over the place. And so we started to also reimagine and rethink indeed how we imagine cities. At the time, we were working with municipalities and also with ministries. So the kind of a need to reimagine the co-design process of cities came from them. But the practice of reimagining cities, it's nothing new. It has a long tradition actually in urban planning, with many having had a global influence to how cities even look like today. From the Howard's Garden City on the left to the Frank Lloyd Wright Broadwalker City, top right corner, and also Kenzo Tange Tokyo Bay Plan in the bottom right corner. Some of those realized in part, some not. However, what was important about those visions is that they were somewhat kind of a socially rooted, even though, of course, they've been in many other cases seen as a chronistic practice. However, there was some sort of a sense that this was the ideal future of living. Nowadays, visions are more of an instrument to generate financial backing for new projects and urban expansions, and also to demonstrate the ability to lead transformative projects. So they have a political and financial power. However, those are quite not a product of social demand, but rather a commodity that is literally traded on the market. So you can just simply purchase a vision for your city. However, by prioritizing this marketability of city visions, there is a significant danger of sidelining the complex demands of local communities. And in best cases, community visions never make it to this. I mean, those visions never make it to construction. Fortunately, I would say. And this is often because, of course, eventually they either lack that financial backing that they were looking for, or they lack the public support. One of the many cases that there is around, perhaps just the biggest and the most famous, is the failed and almost forgotten already Toronto waterfront development that was led by Google quite many years ago already. And this serves as a contemporary illustration of how even the most meticulous planned city vision can actually fail when marketability overcomes the social demand for change. So on paper, the project was absolutely perfect, a benchmark of urban innovation and community-centric spaces. However, in practice, it was, again, detached from the immediate needs that at the time, at least in Toronto, it was affordable housing, social equity, and inclusive community development. This particular case, there was also quite a caveat, which was that Sidewalk Labs, that was in charge of the project, was basically also proposing that kind of the development would take a portion of Toronto's property taxes. So it meant that Google would not only take the privacy from the several of the ideas that they had to implement, but also taxpayer money to realize this project. And Toronto would, of course, then means that they would, as a city, would basically see their taxes going directly to Google without even passing through City Hall. So, but kind of the core issue anyway was this misalignment with community priorities, and this is something that we see today in many, many other developments. Even just a few days ago, the NEOM, the new project that is being built in Saudi Arabia, also have seen a kind of a cut in the ambitions that they originally set. But those visions remained instrumental. Indeed, even NEOM, this city to be built in Northwest Arabia, as actually a resident space at Davos. So it kind of shows how city visions are becoming also instrumental for display of political power and the capacity to reimagine the future. We, of course, wanted to reimagine it with a completely different approach. So we wanted to reimagine participatory planning so that we could actually joyfully negotiate urban change, and also shift the stakeholders' role from commentators to placemaker. This is quite essential for us because it was one of the core demands from the public sector to actually reimagine participatory planning, as it was mostly conflictual and it wasn't really solving the issue of responding to social demands. When we started to analyze this, why this is so, it was clear for us that media was the issue. So in participatory planning process, you have basically you have specialist architect designers who have the extremely powerful media of image to communicate their ideas, while citizens are often relegated to post-its, some online surveys, and at best, some miro boards. So there was a strong imbalance between the stakeholders of the process. So we need to basically reestablish kind of a balance between the vocabulary spoken during participatory planning. So therefore, of course, like images were the key. So to imagine participatory planning, we had to be able to have citizens, stakeholders, investors, designers. So everyone who was part of the process had to be able to speak the language of images, so produce images, so that we could actually reclaim how the future is shaped, and also start to create visions that are actually inspired by the social imaginary. And of course, since it was already 2020 and AI was starting to emerge, we started to work with this idea of collective intelligence in the way that actually Jeff Morgan defines it, which is basically a collective intelligence. They are this kind of a new assemblies of humans and AI that together can shape a desirable urban future based on community values. So this was sort of the core of our mission. And what images can do that no other media can do is that they can allow participants with no prior knowledge in design or creativity or any sort of let's say any of these kind of technical matters to be able to ideate. So trying to basically expand their creativity out of the problem and solution sort of logic, evaluate those ideas, evaluate them in an abstract manner, but also evaluate them in a very concrete manner by testing those ideas in real space, and then eventually communicate. So these were the three kind of elements that we thought would allow for participation to be a more democratic process, and most of all to ensure that every participant would be able to perform those three tasks. So we set up goals, and in 2020 we unbuilt, because it was not even called UrbanistAI yet. We had our first vision where we wanted to create this shared vocabulary to forge the shared imagery of the future. And it was done simply using images and architects who will make sketches. So the way it was done, this was the master plan for the city of Narva, and it was built entirely by citizens. The way we did is that we had a kind of a huge pool of photographs and images and renders, and participants could actually choose their favorite images and renders, debate in groups which ones were the favorite desirable futures, and then eventually you would have a designer who was sketching those futures together. And then they would agree on their final image and say, yes, this is what we want. And as of today, actually, this simple drawing, it's part of the official master plan of the city of Narva, and the city architects see that it in display actually in City Hall. So this was kind of the project that confirmed our assumptions that to joyfully negotiate urban change, we all needed to speak the same language. And we took it to the next step. So after 1 year, there was the first AI version of that, so AI-powered version of that, which was UrbanistAI Open 1. And we basically had a first project to redesign the high street in the northern city here in Jyväskylä in Finland. And it was basically a whole day process in which investors, even bankers, as well as citizens and other participants have basically created a collective vision using generative AI. What was very interesting here is that now you could finally combine the expertise of the everyday life of citizens with technical expertise to build a city, of how to build a city from basically engineers and designers that are part of the process. However, this was 2021. So basically AI was this scary dark thing that it was quite difficult basically to convince a municipality or a ministry to start to work with AI. So basically for almost a full year, we kept on basically developing, but not really having new projects. Actually, the only issue was not really that AI was the new terminator, but the main issue was the lack of a human-human alignment instead of a human-AI alignment. This means that the real enemy was actually the fact that most of digitalization practices made also cities believe that we don't need to bring participation into a form where citizens meet in person in small groups, but just the opposite. Since we have digitalization, why to spend so much money to have a live event when we could just have 6 or 10,000 people fill an online form? So this was the real enemy, actually. So digital mass participation actually doesn't produce any debate, which means that it actually generates ideas without consequences. So that's why we kept pushing for a full year, trying to work on this. And of course, all of a sudden, AI became something nice, 2023. as people got used to ChatGPT and everything else. And this gave us basically the go to start to work with cities and municipalities and ministries to develop this approach. So this is basically a quick version of what participants can do with UrbanistAI. So they can use generative AI to start to ideate, as I mentioned before. So ideate different kind of possible scenario, which are different from just problem and solution. But they can actually start to truly explore ideas that might not be even in their mind before. So usually when participants comes to workshop, they just want, bike lanes, trees, benches. But after this ideation session with the AI, they come up with more complex and more nuanced ideas. And then when they like an idea, they can also expand it. So they can use generative AI to sort of expand that idea into kind of variations. Then, of course, they can choose their favorites and vote collectively or in small teams. Most importantly, they can evaluate those concepts. So once those concepts are developed in the abstract manner, they can be evaluated actually on the real city. This can be done with mobile phones. So participants can actually walk around the city, take photos and transform space, or within groups with iPads and phones, iPads and computers. Then again, you can either evaluate this within the groups or also have an AI agent that helps you evaluate those images. And then this is where sort of this human AI assembly also takes place. And as I said, eventually there is always a kind of final deliberation, so people can vote for their favorite kind of images and have a debate, which that's where the value really is. And then favorite visions can be communicated. So Lisa will tell you more later, but this, for example, is the mayor of Pristina in Kosovo that is basically communicating what the citizens have wanted for their city, and they're starting the procurement process to build some of those spaces. Why we do this in person? Because we see that kind of meaningful participation can only happen when the famous team human agenda it's basically taken into account. And the agenda is rather simple: think constructively, connect meaningfully, and act purposely. And we tried everything, and we think that this can only happen in real space, only when people can meet each other, which means that, of course, it's not as cost effectively as an online survey, but that's where the value is. The value is when people can actually connect meaningfully in real space and truly debate on those solutions. So we started to basically apply this model that instead of having kind of exactly online surveys with 6,000, 10,000 people, we rather try to meaningfully engage and deliberate with many small groups. So 50 to 100 people at a time. And this has been actually extremely successful, I say, because the kind of participants are truly engaged and we see the results already happening. Clearly, we can develop new projects, build new relationships, and also strengthen local networks by gaining a sense of belongings within the community, but also with the project itself. And so we started in 2023 to kind of to apply this model, and the test ground was the city of Helsinki. They basically allowed us to sort of accept. I mean, they accepted to kind of to try this, and it was quite serious because it was a construction project. So this was the first kind of utilization of UrbanistAI to actually also kind of physically reshape the urban environment of a city. So we started to work with other organizations, and those other organizations are, for example, the Estonian Ministry of Climate. So with them, we basically started to develop the model even further, and we started to basically train designers and planners and architects to use generative AI to connect with their citizens. Then with the Mohammed bin Rashid Center for Government Innovation, we started a process quite similar, where again, planners would sort of start to understand how AI works. And most importantly, they start to shape their own technology so that they can also start to engage with the local community as well with other stakeholders. And we're starting to see that, of course, like we are well academic background, but since this started, it's just a year and a half ago, we had to focus quite a lot on actually delivering this idea, this vision. But we see already that some papers are starting to emerge. So from the academic literature, that it seems that indeed those visuals, they're not just useful for us for our project, but it seems that it actually creates more support by citizens and residents when it's deployed purposely. So I would like to just to conclude that it's been quite a busy year, but I'm really happy to see that now there is many cities and other organizations. There is more than 30 of them actually in just 1 year that they started to deploy UrbanistAI in co-design and participatory planning purposes. And yeah, now Lisa can basically also drive you through some concrete examples. So I just wanted to give you the big picture, and now Lisa can show some like actually concrete projects that have been carried out last year. Thank you, everyone.
I will now share the screen.
Okay, to close the sharing. Oh, okay, stop sharing.
Hello, everyone. I'm excited to share with you some of the applications of Urbanist AI platform. So we will cover some of the use cases in different contexts with different types of participants and audiences. So first, start with our projects where the audience was very young. They were children. So we were really curious to see how children would interact in this participatory planning context. So we have customized the platform to make it more children-friendly. We made it simple, and we added the gamification aspect to it. So our first project was in Tampere. It was a group of school children, and it was financed by the Architects Council of Europe. And we wanted to, the goal was to develop and test different methodologies for design with the younger audience. And so the task was to co-design a schoolyard. So the children from this schoolyard in Tampere had to contribute to the possible ways of this, to imagine how the schoolyard could be transformed. And there were 3 types of interaction that we wanted to test. The first one was when we just had a selection of printed photos of different options that they could choose from for how the space could be transformed. And each child could pick 2 options for transformation. The reason why there were just 2, because it was difficult just to imagine how we can, fill out this space with so many things, like a climbing wall, a playground, then a pool, it was just, the limit was just 2 really nice suggestions. So each kid provided this options. Then within the group, they had to vote for 2 winning solutions. So they had to start discussion between each other. And then there was the voting. So they were voting with hands to select the best solution that was most exciting for them. The second type of interaction was the just drawing. So they were just drawing by hand, the potential, the best ways that the schoolyard could be transformed. It was exciting, but there was some difficulties as well, because usually, the ideas were limited or repeated. So there was not enough inspiration. They were also voting by hand. And the third one was actually where they were directly using AI. And the interface was allowing them to choose from lots of different options, and they could test them right away and discuss in groups. And again, this was also concluded with the session voting. I think the actual, the takeaway from this experience was that the real value is in human interaction, and technology only facilitates this interaction. This goes back to what Daniel was just talking about. The next project that we had also with a younger audience was part of the Was part of the Milano Digital Week, and it was an interactive workshop called Children as Urban Planners. It was hosted by the Leonardo da Vinci Museum of Science and Technology in Milan. In this workshop, we had children and their parents who participated. And the goal was to introduce both parents and children to, to urban planning. So we talked briefly about its importance, the role of urban planners, and just, the community well-being, what is it? And we also asked them about their experience of living in Milan. What are some of the problems that they face? Of course, parents also had contributed to that as well. And we talked about, how is it to live in the city if you're a child, if you're a parent. So I think that was also important part of this discussion. Then we had hands-on tasks. And the first one was, again, as in the previous example, was reimagining the schoolyard, but that was in a bigger city, so that was setting was slightly different. Then also proposing different designs for a certain area in Milan, and then just focusing on the city of the future. What are some elements that have to be in the city of the future according to them? And they were using iPads and their mobile phones. They also had some, we also printed out some different options for them as well, so that will also be useful. And in the end, we had a discussion and voting. And we encouraged them to look at the common details, the common elements in the best solutions. What unites them? What are some elements that we all think would be great for the city of the future? So, and I think that was a really nice beginner experience in the civic engagement. So let's move on. Yeah, and then we will cover a few use cases of placemaking. And Damiano briefly mentioned the co-designing the Helsinki Summer Street project. So we have, this initiative was part of the city's plan to close 3 main streets to traffic during the summer months. And the city municipality nominated the citizens' assembly. So they selected 50 citizens, but the goal was to have a very diverse group. So they wanted to represent each type of citizen. So there were children, elderly, people coming from different cultural backgrounds, people with disabilities. And it's important to know that also some of the participants were actually business owners of those businesses that are located on those streets. So they also had to contribute to this new construction. And so they were divided in groups. They created different scenarios for those streets. Then there was a voting, there was a discussion with the urban planners and participants. And very interestingly, some people, for example, there was a person who was visually impaired. She came with her daughter, who was just 10 years old. She was helping her. She was her assistant. And she was able to successfully participate in the discussion because she was just describing really well what her vision is. And then the platform was visualizing this, and actually some of her suggestions, her feedback was appreciated. She had the most voted results. And there was another person who was hard of hearing, but he was also able to participate because he was just, creating the images. And he also was able to vote. And I think it's a great example of a truly diverse group of people being able to contribute successfully to this city initiative. And actually, so some of the citizens' concepts that had the most votes were actually implemented in the summer months of 2023. So the completed construction did use some of the concept developed by the citizens. Here you can see the Helsinki Design Museum Square after the completion of the works. So you can see that they use some of the parklets, some green spaces over there, and a lot of places for seating, the public seating. So then another example of placemaking workshop was a co-designing a residential block in Pristina. And here we also involved the citizens, and importantly, as Damian also mentioned, the city mayor also participated in this discussion. And the purpose was to redesign the residential block, and they have started the construction. I think right now they only did the children's playground, but I think it's in the works. So soon they will continue on. They will implement more designs. And we also had a few community events where UrbanistAI was also used. One of them was actually in East Cleveland. We worked with Seventh Hill, and it's a leading local urban design consultancy. And this open house was organized by a local developer, and it was organized to convince the city, the decision makers, and show the potential scenarios of for the development in that neighborhood. And we wanted to collaboratively formulate recommendations that will direct future investments and that will architecturally and culturally define this neighborhood. The neighborhood that we focused on was the area along Euclid Avenue, the public spaces along Euclid Avenue. So the Seventh Hill team led this open house with more than 50 participants. And there were 7 different stations with different types of interaction. So UrbanistAI was just one of those 7 stations. And the team members of the Seventh Hill, they were interacting with the local residents and getting their feedback about the future of this district. And interestingly, we not only they explored just the urban planning aspects, but they also looked at the potential, the aesthetic, the general aesthetic of the neighborhood. So they looked at how would you like to have the graffiti in your area? What themes would you like to see there? What style of graffiti would you think you would like, you would prefer? I think that was also interesting. Here is another project in Berlin. So we worked with the City Lab Berlin, and it's a local organization that focuses on urban innovation, and they experiment with new ideas. So from May to September, they organized this series of workshops. It's called Kids Labor. So essentially, they use these shipping containers that they move around different districts of Berlin. And they just organize different educational workshops and networking events across different neighborhoods. And just, every citizen can every neighbor can pass by and just take part in this event and get to know the neighbor, but also interact and learn something. So for this project, we customized the interface and just, to make it, to use the relevant information, the relevant scenarios for those districts. And participants were able to easily go through this guided interface and visualize their ideas of how their streets, how this neighborhood could look like. And so we were able to keep the audience as open as possible, and while keeping interaction meaningful, because it's difficult to handle interaction meaningful if you deal with lots of people. But this project is still ongoing, and we will have another collaboration with them this year as well. So, and we also had some use cases in open participation. And actually, this is one of the examples. It was a Zurich mass participation experiment, that's how I call it. But essentially, we worked with an innovation agency, Koina, they're based in Zurich, and they wanted to scale up to mass participation. So we developed an application where every resident and every visitor of Zurich could just log in and see the results, see the ideas produced by other people that they shared publicly. And also just, take a picture and place it on a map and do some, interaction. So the goal was to test some ideas about regreening of the city. This project didn't go as well as we were planning to. It just, from the interaction point of view, yes, it worked, people were using it, but it never went, I would say, viral.
Yeah.
It never really started public discussion. I think that's the point.
Yeah.
People were just trying it, using it, yeah, it's interesting, but then it never really became something that people would just talk about between each other, and share. We also had a few events called scenario planning. So one of them was in Indonesia. So it was organized by UNDP Accelerator Labs. And the objective was to involve the local community in shaping the future of Nusantara, which is Indonesia's future capital city. So we focused on developing design guidelines for two types of development areas, the public park and the residential area. And so we conducted a design charrette in East Kalimantan with various stakeholders and indigenous communities, as you can see here in the photos. And since the new capital is just in a planning phase, the work should focus just on developing the elemental principles of good public space and housing. So this was done by producing community mood boards made by just conceptual visualizations. And lastly, this project is still ongoing. So this was an educational workshop that we did in Panama. It was organized by UNDP Panama, and we involved a group of 60 teenagers. And we wanted to assess the climate change impacts and just visualize mitigation strategies. So these groups of teenagers, they would take a photo of the street and then just their home space, their streets in their neighborhood, and then transform it and see how it would look like. Let's say if there was a flood, if there was a hurricane. And it was just an exercise to open this discussion and visualize scenarios. So of course, these scenarios are not precise. It's just something to start the conversation and just exercise this thinking about the potential impacts. I think it's powerful to see your street, transformed during wildfire. So it also starts this conversation. How can we mitigate this? How can we prevent this? So that was the purpose of the workshop, but it's still ongoing. And let's see what the results will be. Yeah, so that's it for my presentation.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you again for, I think there's a lot there to digest in, and especially I think for me, as somebody who works in the space of trying to facilitate conversations, I'm really kind of interested in this ability for this tool to facilitate and bring people together across intergenerationals and also people who are either visually impaired or hearing impaired. And it's been great to hear that this is a tool that can begin to invite and bring those folks around the table to imagine futures of their city. So I think that's really, really cool. But I think for now, what I would like to do, if you don't mind, to open the conversation to more questions. We can start with if there's any questions online that we can get to, and here as well in our audience. Can't read well there. If there are any questions online, please feel free to type in your questions or comments online, and we can get to those. Yeah, and thanks, Obi, for answering the questions about. So the video will be posted online once it's done. I think the link is already been shared, right? Yeah, great. Okay.
I think the first question came from Kishan. Although this tool is capable of engineering visual images that offer context and perspective of individuals, it lacks the ability to incorporate design principles like footfall and budgets. Consequently, the final projects may not be as useful as anticipated. How do you plan to address the balancing challenge? That's a great question.
Yeah, well, actually, this was our very first question for the workshop in Helsinki, where there was an actual construction project of 2 streets, and they only had 3 months to go from workshop to construction. The point is that we simply don't have to. So you don't have to create a tool that does everything, right? This is the best tool to engage with citizens. Then the engineers, they have their best tools to, calculate the costs of those projects, and then there are the city planners who have the best tools to calculate the budgets. So the only great thing is that all those people were present in that workshop. So we actually don't lead the workshops ourselves. We only pass the knowledge. So we actually train organizations to use UrbanistAI. And in this case, the organization was the city of Helsinki, together with the engineers and the planners who were supposed to build the cities. So that conversation happens in that room. And we provide the tools for interaction and deliberation, and then the engineers and the architects, they have the tools that answer all the other questions that are basically in that budgets and designs and so
on.
Yeah. Second question, I really like the human interaction. I really like that the human interaction is priority. Is this something to be all design work involved, possibility to tools? I don't know whether I understand that question very well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what it means that to make a workshop, it still takes a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely, because this is kind of the prerogative to actually have a meaningful democratic process. Otherwise, you can also organize a workshop in a single day, but then you're just playing with AI. You're not deciding what kind of city you want to build. So yes, there is a lot of work involved. There is a lot of people involved. Even in the Panama workshop that, for example, Lisa was showing you, there was a lot of work to actually look back in the past and see what kind of climate change related disasters hit the city of Panama, and then basically do some small AI training to teach the AI to reproduce those climate related disasters in Panama. So yeah, for each workshop, there is plenty of work behind.
And we always try to, depends on the type of workshop, but sometimes we also try to customize the actual interface for the purpose of this workshop.
Yeah. Yeah, but maybe expanding a little bit on that in terms of both the preparation and when you are actually part of the process. I like that you clarify that you don't actually run the workshops, right? You are part of a team and you support presumably the team that's facilitating, right? So what kind of the images that are generated as part of the scenario planning? Can you talk a little bit about what kind of pre-planning you would do? And also, is there things that those who are facilitating might have to do in advance with participants before they come for it to be efficient? I'm still a little bit not clear how the actual mechanics of, how do you deploy this AI to be efficient and effective in a specific scenario? Maybe you can expand a little bit on that.
Yes. So usually we have a 4-hour session. It's either in one go or in 2 meetings with the organization who is going to kind of deploy that technology. And it pretty much depends on the type of workshop they want to do. So usually it's about 3. We basically have developed 3 methodologies. So one for workshop that are actually about construction, one that is more about participatory planning, more in general, that doesn't involve construction yet. So it's for city vision, urban planning, and also for sort of a detail planning. And then the third one is just for, let's say, engagement in a broader sense, like the one in Panama. It's not about constructing a new city, it's understanding how a city would change if no climate mitigation actions are undertaken. And for each of these three type of workshop, there's three different methodologies. If you are, of course, like in Helsinki, actually building a piece of a city, there's a lot of more preparations because you need to have there the engineers and all the specialists that are involved, also part of the process. So we train them to use UrbanistAI, and then we set up like the workshop as if it's kind of a movie. So we actually have a script what every person has to do within the 2 hours workshop. And we so it honestly it's yeah. Yeah, please.
Go ahead, sorry.
No, yeah, just that. So basically, like it really depends on the type of workshop you're engaging with. So for instance, if you're just doing more of a like the one in Berlin, where citizens are only basically kind of reimagining their neighborhoods just to kind of communicate to the city how they would like the city to be like, it's much more simpler. The only thing you need is that either you preload photographs of the city beforehand, and then when citizens tap on the photo, they can just choose what kind of transformation they want to test, or they can even do it directly with their own phone. So but that requires zero preparations. You basically just have a QR code that every participant scan with the phone, and then they're free to choose from the pool of photographs they will preload, or they can just walk around on their own in the city, take photos, select what they want to transform, and just type in a prompt, or just use some predefined prompt that we provide. And that's zero preparation. It's just, just have to share a QR code.
Yeah, that's good to know because I asked that question as far as, one of the things that we learned during the pandemic when we kind of all moving engagements online was just how long it took to get people to get used to the tool that they're going to be using, right? So you would have some online thing where people would move stickies, right? And then people just couldn't find, how do I do this? How do I do that? So in this end, sounds like, yes, you do have preparation with the kind of technical folks, the engineers and others, but the users on the front end, depending on what you're working on, it could be simple as taking a picture, uploading it, and not having to be too much tech savvy or to be too prepared for the process. Because I think that sometimes can also encourage or discourage participation and interaction. So it's great to hear that there's different levels of preparation, the back end and the front end, depending on what you're doing.
And we try to make the interaction as easy as possible. So we just everyone could use it, all types of audiences could use it, and without setting up all those different types. But,
I think we have another question.
In inclusive participatory planning and with the software, how do you manage different levels of interaction and appetite to engage in community development with AI? Have you developed a scale yet on level of citizens participatory planning?
Yeah, I think this actually speaks nicely to the scope of the project you had, right? I'm really interested to hear what your take on the project so far that you've been doing to that question of engagement and scaling.
Oh, yeah, we don't hear you.
What I mentioned at the beginning is that if you mean scale if you mean by including as many people as possible, so having kind of interfaces for different type of, so yes, we tried with Zurich and we might try with other cities. However, to be honest, from a technical perspective, of course, Lisa and Luca, with the AI designers, they've done a fantastic job in basically having a platform for each type of use cases. So we literally have a different UX UI for a workshop of 5 or a workshop for 100, or we have a separate app even exactly for a kind of a entire city kind of type of participation. However, as I mentioned in the presentation at the beginning, a meaningful participation seems to occur only when you have small groups of people. So while it is possible to have a separate mobile interface for thousands, we see that, yes, it is possible for them to share ideas, but if there is no debate amongst people with different opinions, you don't have that democratic process that produces innovation. So it's only when you have two people with two different ideas that finds a compromise. Actually, that compromise, it's what we actually might call innovation. So it's possible to scale it up, but we like to keep it small for this reason.
More meaningful in this way. think the next one, I think the man already responded. I think so. So the designs can be improved as and when based on the actual user's input. But would average citizens be able to make the right call? Sorry, I'm not trying to put down the idea. I'm just curious about the realism involved in the product. Okay, and Juliana says usually not.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very difficult for citizens to make the right call. Even for engineers, it's difficult to make the right call. That's why a lot of projects fail. And that's why we believe in this power of collective intelligence. So when you have many ideas from different, I mean, many people coming from different backgrounds, both technical and not, trying to co-design the future of cities is where exactly kind of also bad ideas get stopped, or kind of new ideas emerge. Make a very concrete example. It was in the city of Helsinki. So of these 3 streets, 2 were done with UrbanistAI and 1 without. And what happened in these 2 streets we done with UrbanistAI is that when citizens put the bike lane, right away the engineer said, okay, but the bike lane has to be at least 2 meters and it has to be made of asphalt. And then immediately the citizen said, okay, no, we don't want it then, because if we put the asphalt, we have to destroy the cobblestone from the 18th century. In the 3rd street, without UrbanistAI, this could not be assessed. So it was built, and now there was a literally national outrage because the historic center of kind of the historic street, the main historic street of Helsinki, was basically half demolished. I mean, half destroyed with asphalt. So that's kind of the idea. There's also bad ideas can be found when you have participants of technical and non-technical background coming together.
Yeah, you identify the weak points of those proposed design, and they're obvious, they become obvious for everyone, or they become the topic of discussion, and then the solution is found. But it's important to identify those weaknesses. Yeah. So another question from Marshall. Many of the examples shared were images that depict best practice when it comes to sustainable design, pedestrian-friendly streets, green space. How has the design of your solution accounted for ideas that may go against those ideas? I'm thinking of the example of workshop participants that are staunchly pro-parking, for example. Yeah. Great question.
Yeah, I think again the Helsinki case is one of the best, because the city of Helsinki was in charge of selecting the citizens' assembly, have managed to actually put in the same groups, indeed, drivers and strongly cyclist advocates. And what we see exactly is that when they talk to each other, they find these kind of compromises in those solutions. So what you have seen in those images, actually, it is in quite many cases a compromise that has been brought together by people with different opinions. So this is what we try to do, actually. Instead of having groups, let's say a group of citizens, I mean, everybody's a citizen, but let's say a group kind of a citizens assembly, then you have the stakeholders, then you have the investors. We try to mix them all up together and also try to understand beforehand, like, if somebody is a kind of a strong allied of the car and somebody's a strong allied of the bicycle, and put them in the same group. And actually, there are very good AI tools right now that also do this kind of thing. So you just fill up a survey, or you fill up kind of open questions, and then the AI is pairing people together based on diverging opinions.
Yeah. So in a sense, I think the point to emphasize here that this doesn't replace traditional engagement. In fact, it should really enhance it, right? That you don't see this as something that can take over, and all of a sudden in cities, and they can just send this to you and you implement and send results. You still see this as you need the human interaction, you need the debate, you need the compromise, and this tool can enable that, can be a part of that enablement.
Yeah, the purpose is to have this interaction.
Yeah. While I have one question, while we see if there's any others that are coming, it's regarding the client in this instance. So far, it looks like you've worked with different groups. You work with, like municipal organizations and non-profit groups, and I don't know whether you work with architects and planners, but I'm just curious do you have like a view of who do you see as the main client in the future of this tool, or do you want it to be something that can be applied by anybody? And so far, based on the groups you've worked with, which ones have been more receptive and which ones have been less receptive?
I can start from the second, maybe. Well, most receptive actually it's been at the national level, so like ministries and larger organizations that are, let's say, dealing with national policies. And I guess that's only because the kind of policies on AI started to take shape first at the kind of a national level. So I think they were just more familiar. So they were the first one to sort of start to work with us because they understood what we were trying to do. But now actually it's reversing. So now we're working much more with cities than with national organizations. But I think that we are happy with who we work with. So municipalities, actually universities, also it's increasing a lot. We start to work a lot with universities because they want to start to actually develop their own methods, how to deploy UrbanistAI. And actually we changed the interface for them. So that's also like one of the main things that we do also kind of Lisa and Luca is to sort of write you when clients come to us and they say, okay, we want to actually, we have our own method. And then we redesign the actual interface. So there are some interfaces that you will never see because only some of our clients have designed it for themselves. We would be very happy if we could start to get actually local activist groups, even like, building associations. Like it's just that we haven't been extremely active in sales. So everything that we've done is through cooperations and programs and national financing and so on. So we haven't tried to reach client directly.
Yeah. Is it because you're expensive or something? Like how does one get to work with you guys? Like can you talk a little bit about the access and affordability of the system and all of that side of things? Yeah.
No, I think we don't have we don't have we have not structured sales as a part of kind of our ambition. We just started to work with the mission and then started to contact some of those organizations that we know we could share the mission. And then basically people started to contact us. So we are in this 1 year and a half, that's how we've been kind of operating. Exactly. We have simply, didn't even think of or had the time to start to, go door to door because we were happy with our customer base, but this might change in the future. But let's say it was purely because our work was mission driven. And so we started to work with organizations that shared that mission.
And I think someone wanted to know which cities in the US have used this so far. I think you talked about one.
Yeah, so far, it has only been Cleveland because we have this collaboration with the local urban planning consultancy. But so far, strangely enough, we are mostly focused in Europe and the Middle East and Asia. But so far, US, we only have one example, one use case in the US. We would love to have more, absolutely. We are in discussion with a few cities, but we would always be happy to work with more cities in the future.
And any thoughts on architects and urban planners, the uptake for something like this? Like, is this, on the one side, as a planner, should anybody be scared of what you're doing in terms of what they do as better and better, or do you think that we should be happy and see the positive side of it?
Actually, we have a cooperation actually just started with it's an organization called Visible Cities of Planners in US. So perhaps they might start to kind of develop approaches because again, said like we are not organizing the workshops ourselves. So they might now start to kind of find these opportunities. But I think there is not much to be scared. I mean, exactly what scares me the most is more that we may deploy this technology without understanding how to use it. And I think that it's more that the kind of architects and designers are going to have an increasingly more mediating role. So while sometimes you might be simply inspired by the knowledge within your own team, what's happening right now with these technologies that architecture offices and designers, they're becoming increasingly inspired by community needs. So I think it's going to contribute so much more to the social ecology of cities when we take part of a process of this kind. So I'm not honestly scared, and also all the biases that there are in AI, there are of course also biases inherent in our culture. But since we don't use any of the APIs, we can train our own model, which means also we can bias it and unbias it based on with the community we work with. So quite often the local community actually give us photographs of their area so that we can actually bias the model according to their sort of cultural preferences and cultural practices.
Yeah, while talking about that, actually, we not realize we're running out of time. While talking about biases, maybe you mentioned you mentioned sidewalks, which that development didn't go ahead because some of the issues with privacy, right? Privacy that was slightly different. In your use of imagery and things like that, what goes on in discussions around photographs that people give you and how they get used and how that information gets stored? Do you have some kind of policy or guidelines around privacy and photographs and all of that stuff?
Yeah, so the kind of our approach is that basically if a community or exactly if a city provides photographs and images to build their localized generative AI model, that model can only be utilized by them and no other of the clients. So basically we fork the model in that sense, so that everything which has been produced with their images, it's only utilized by them. So that's been the approach. And then also the ownership of the final image basically goes to the citizens who produced it. So they can actually directly in the app, if they use the phone, download it and reshare it, and there is no watermark or anything of that kind. So that's also very important, is that they have the ownership not only of the process of co-designing, but they have the ownership of what they produce in this workshop. So they are free to keep the debating on. And this is extremely important when you think about democracy, because let's say even if a rogue city would only select some of the images used in the workshop and not the one chosen by the citizens still have the originals and say, no, that's kind of the city is trying to fool you. This was our vision. So that's why images are so powerful, because when they're yours, you can then prove wrong somebody else is trying to fool you.
There's another comment.
Yeah, I will take one last comment, and maybe the audience that's here
yeah.
can have one question as well. We'll take that online and then we can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of inequalities stitched in cities. Activist groups are critical, especially if we're intent to expanding in the US cities. UrbanistAI could be moving for dialogue and reimagining the city with the ongoing social and political challenges. It's an elephant in the room in city innovations. So it's a great comment.
Yeah. Any questions?
Sure. Yeah. Should I just speak?
Yeah.
For audio?
They can hear. Yeah.
Okay. So frequently in participatory planning, the touch point is pretty narrow for the populace as a whole, right? Like you might be able to get someone in for a workshop relatively early, and you can generate a lot of ideas and excitement. But then as the process moves on, as ideas get refined, as planners and engineers become increasingly involved and specific, it can be really hard to continue to bring people in. So I'm curious what your vision is for how this tool or other tools might be used to develop and mature that process so that there's democracy and participation throughout the entire continuum, all the way to construction.
Yeah.
Great question.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about process, not technology. So exactly like if you had 500 people who can draw, then we don't need AI actually. But what we really need, and it cannot be replaced, it's exactly that process. And the way it's been designed is that the participants are actually part of this ideation session, then they're part of the review session. So once the actual construction drawings are produced, and then a third time when it's being built. So there is basically, let's say, after the very first workshop, there is still 2 sessions to, in some sense, provide feedback. I think this is a bit more the trickiest thing, because not every city might be able to organize this on their own. So I would say that this is the biggest challenge, actually. So the biggest challenge is to have many groups of participants. So again, like instead of avoiding online participation, but rather trying to have a network of kind of assemblies. And then the second one is to actually be able and have the fundings also to engage with citizens 3 times throughout the process.
Yeah, I think that's it, we see that a lot. Sometimes even before you finish just the planning process itself, interest begins to wane, and there's a lot of conversation right now about, how do you also facilitate people to participate in something you just don't have the time to take time and be involved in person all the time, right? Some organizations are beginning to put incentives towards, like daycare for kids and things like that. So it's a real challenge. And I think, to the point about process, I really like the fact that something like this could almost like bring the life of the process throughout. Because once things move from the colorful pictures into the drawings, usually, citizens are, it's hard to understand technical drawings, but you can get involved in reviewing.
Yeah.
So this could actually allow that to continue to happen, right? As a tool. Great.
Much time do we have?
No, I think we unfortunately we're gonna leave it here because we got 5 minutes of. If there are any more questions, perhaps we can kind of collect those and still share them.
Yeah.
I don't know whether folks might want to, especially people online, might want to get in touch. I don't know. Are there any contacts? Your contacts
Sure.
that you might be able to share?
Contacts, yeah.
Because I suppose people might be interested in this. I'm personally interested.
Yeah.
You already know that.
Yeah,
But yeah, if you want to share your contacts with people online, we will end the presentation here today. And thank you so much for the presentation. And thank you everyone online for joining us today and questions and sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you so much. It was really interesting.
Perfect.